Everyone. It is really nice to be in a room full of friends, and I'm so glad that you're here. Welcome to our first ever Parentology. Thank you. Over the last decade of my time in family ministry, I've stored away tidbits of conversation that parents bring to me, and one that continually comes up time and time again over the last few years are the child's relationship with technology. Whether that be appropriate TV shows to TikTok or Snapchat, we have a large range of children and youth at our church. And it has been on my heart since to provide a safe place in the church to discuss the hard topics of parenting in the 21st century. So the thought is that we'll bring on experts on various topics while also having space without the distraction of children, hence the childcare, to talk to other parents and leaders in the church. Tonight's session will include a presentation, followed by a facilitated discussion in smaller table groups, which is what you saw out in the hallway. I'll share more details at the end to help you understand how you should decide where to go, but I do want you to know table groups are an essential part of this equation. There's a diverse group of people in this room with various levels of experience of parenting and being around children and youth, and we want to make sure that you can have conversations that feel fitting for you. We know that there are going to be people in this room who are just beginning the conversation and others who might be looking for more immediate guidance or affirmation of the decisions that they've already had to make. And so our plan is to host Parentology regularly throughout the school year. It will be on Wednesday nights. However, if we need to look into changing the timing of it at all, I want to hear from you. This is the first time we've ever done something like this, and so a lot of your input and feedback will be necessary and valuable. Tonight's session is called the Tech-Wise Community. And what we found through research is that young people, ages 12 through 25, believe that social media is the major contributing factor for the decline in mental health. And I want to repeat that again. I want you to really hear it. It is young people themselves, not just older generations, those who are growing up immersed in technology, who believe that social media is negatively impacting their mental health. And anecdotally, we've seen this mirrored. If you ask any of the youth in your midst who have gone to summer camp or a retreat with us, they will share that they wavered between anger towards us for banning screens and gratefulness for a break. And I imagine many of you are either fighting this battle now or you're not looking forward to this day to come. Many studies show that the use of smartphones has a negative effect on adolescents by way of poor self-esteem, body image, social exclusion and fear of missing out, emotional detachment and connection, lack of social support, sleep disruption, emotional distress, anxiety, suicidal thoughts, loneliness, and isolation. It's a long list because this stuff is important. But the center of concern is this: how are we engaging in our communities, in our households, in our neighborhoods, in our schools, and in our church? One Gen Z student said, "My brain chemistry most certainly changed as a result of growing up in tandem with the internet, but I don't believe that I'm any more addicted to it than my own parents." Insert almost any adult into this sentence: my friends, my cousins, my pastors, my teachers. And hear me now. If you can hear anything right now, this session is not meant to cast judgment by any means. I do not want you to walk out of this room feeling fearful about how to make decisions for your kids or your youth. It is meant to encourage self-reflection and ask how we as parents and leaders for the next generation demonstrate a healthy relationship with technology. And so our speaker tonight is one of our very own, Joseph Schlabs. He wrote his master's thesis on a biblical theology of the body and an applied theology of technology. Please give a warm welcome to Joey.
Hey everybody, can y'all hear me? Thanks so much for making tonight a priority and for coming out. Courtney, thank you so much for initiating this and putting it together. She described it to me It's supposed to be like a theology on tap for parents. So hopefully we'll continue to do these. Maybe there'll be a podcast in the future, all sorts of things like that. Tonight I have, first off, she said experts. I don't really know if I'm an expert on this. I'm probably an expert at failing at it, like many of us are in our modern age, especially post-pandemic. But I have 4 main points that I want to go over tonight. And we have to go quickly because we're going to get some time to discuss and share thoughts together. But here's the 4 points that we're going to cover. Participation, pattern of technology, God's purposes, and a plan. So let's talk about the importance of participation. Courtney already alluded to this, but I just want everyone to know that I'm still trying to figure this out. I really don't know how to do it. I've spent about 10 years thinking about this topic, maybe not quite 10, 9, 8 years. So I've learned some things, but I'm still on this journey, just like you guys are. And also, I think it's important to realize that we're all on this journey in the different stages of this journey. Some of us probably are more conservative, some of us are more liberal when it comes to technology use, and that's okay. It's important for us to come together to share thoughts, share tools, things like that we've done. But modern life is challenging. It's very challenging. And modern parenting is challenging. So we're all coming to this topic from different backgrounds, different experiences, and especially I think since the pandemic. The pandemic was especially hard for parents. If you had young kids, it really hit young families really, really hard. So all that to say, I just don't want you to feel any shame at all related to this topic. Everything's grace. I'm so glad you showed up. Everything is grace. So I'm glad you came to participate tonight. But it's important that we participate. So that's why I decided to title the talk, The TechWise Community. That's actually based on Andy Crouch's book. There's a copy of that outside, which is The TechWise Family. And the reason why I titled to that is that this is not, what the technologies that are coming out now are not like what they were when I was growing up in the 80s and 90s, where, maybe I went over to Johnny's house and he didn't have TV, but then Johnny came over to my house and I had a TV and he'd be like, well, my parents don't like that I watch TV. It's way different because technology is so much more evasive, it's so much more small. We all have a little TV in our pocket at all times. So it's a way different than it was as kids. So it's important for us, what doesn't work anymore, in other words, is for us to only say, this is how our family is going to do it. That used to work, but I actually will contend and argue that it's not going to work as well anymore, even though you do need to have your own plan for a family. So that's why this is called the TechWise Community. The New Testament is written to communities, right? The plural you, right? This is a lot of preachers pull this out. When Paul says you in Romans or in Corinthians, he's saying y'all, right? He's writing to the believers, to the people of God, the body of Christ. And we're supposed to bear each other's burdens. We're supposed to lift each other up. So if there is any institution or any group of people that should approach this difficult topic together, not alone, but together, it should be the church, right? It should be the church. We should be able to approach this difficult topic communally rather than just individually. Jonathan Haidt, he's a sociologist at NYU. He's written a lot of fantastic books. Christians tend to really like him. He's not a Christian. He's an expert on a couple different things, but one of his fields of study is social media and mental health among teens. And he's done a lot of work on it. But I was listening to this interview with him, and this is what actually gave me the idea of wanting to do a communal talk about this, was from this interview. And this is what he said in the interview. A lot of the creators of this technology, he's talking about social media, do not let their kids have it. The creators know that these things were made to be addictive. They were made to grab eyeballs and not let go. And they've only gotten more addictive as they've evolved. The technologies are so attractive that they tend to crowd out all other healthy activities. If you have kids, especially if you have kids under 16, please talk to other parents in your community or the principals at your school and tell them we need some sensible norms because we can't solve this problem by ourselves. If I'm going to keep my kids off social media, but my son might say to me, Dad, all my friends are on social media, then it would be really hard for me to resist that because I don't want my son to miss out. But if my son had a community of friends, even a small community of friends, that weren't on social media, then it would be much easier to resist it. This has to be done on a community level. Recently, you'll actually have this in your packet, but the Surgeon General of the United States released a report on social media and mental health of teens, and he talked about it in this, he talked about it a little bit related to this Pew survey. It says, Pew Research has found that up to 95% of teens reported using at least one social media platform, while more than 1/3 said they use social media almost constantly. As social media use has risen, so have self-reports and clinical diagnosis among adolescents of anxiety and depression, along with emergency revisits for self-harm and suicidal ideation. So that's point one, participate. We need y'all to participate. And that's why the table discussion should be helpful. I'm trying to figure this out, and I need good ideas. And I have found, Melissa and I, by the way, I should say this, most of my being pushed into this was because of my wife, because she's just a bad A, if I may say that here. And I'm really grateful for her, because I would have just like had the TV on and screens in front of our kids from the moment they had hands. So I'm really grateful for her. But also I was in seminary and I was trying to figure out I don't think I'm going to be a pastor, so maybe I should think about something that's really relative, and I just had a bunch of kids at that time. So I started really thinking about it related to kids first. But we need to participate in this together. We're recording this talk. The slides will be on the talk as well, so you can share it with friends and family, principals, that kind of thing. But what I was going to say is we had a plan related to video games with our kid, which was once our oldest kid was 12, that's when we would let him get video games. And do it in moderation, right? Like only one day a week or whatever. Well, by the time he was 10, he was the only one in his whole friend group that didn't have video games. And it was really problematic because he would hang out with his friends, and it wasn't like his friends were like addicted to video games, and they got to play, with relative amount of time. But he would get around his friends, and they would talk about Minecraft or Mario Kart, right, or whatever, and he just literally had no idea what they were talking about. And so we don't want to be fundamentalists, so we decided maybe we should get this for him early, and we did. And since then, when we play the Switch, when we play Minecraft, most of the time we try to encourage doing it in community, doing it together. And we'll talk more about the importance of that. But that's just a simple example that when you have one person that has some thoughtfulness behind it, but everybody else is kind of more liberal and just sure, get on TikTok, my 12-year-old, it's really hard to resist it for the other parents. That's why it has to be a communal enterprise. We have to think about this together. So we need y'all to participate. Point number 2, the pattern of technology. Some of this is going to sound pretty commonsensical, but I think it's important to think through the pattern that technology always brings us. And the pattern is this. You can get something or achieve something without having to go through the physical work with your body to do it. So you can get the benefit of something without having to go through the long and difficult process, right? So with medical technology, that's been really helpful, right? Medical technology has allowed us not to get to the point of death, so we get to skip over the death part and live longer, right? There's a lot of amazing things that medical technology has done. But technology always seeks to relieve us of the burden of our bodies, okay? Technology always seeks to relieve us of the burden of our bodies. When you're engaging with a technological thing, whether it's an oven or a phone or a car, find yourself, as you just go about your days this week, noticing how much it's removing a burden from your body. 3 quick modern examples. Farming. Many of us don't farm, right? 1900, 90% of Americans were farmers. 90%. My grandfather was a farmer. Most of y'all's grandparents or great-grandparents were probably farmers. Farming is insanely hard work. My dad grew up on a farm. He still does farm a little bit, and he always just talks about this kind of a whole post-pandemic Wendell Berry kind of hipster move to go back out to farms. I actually read an article recently that was talking about mutilations that are on the rise on farming because there's all these hipster urbanites that are now taking up farming and they don't know how to do it. That's not my notes, but farming was hard. It was burdensome to your body. You had to get up. My grandfather always says, "I work dark to dark," right? Gets up before the sun rises, goes to bed after the sun sets. But now We have our own little garden, right? Which is labeled in the grocery store. So we can, because of technology, we don't have to farm. I don't think that's a bad thing, by the way. I don't think necessarily that we should all be farmers. I think we should be connected to nature and be aware of how farming works. But I'm not necessarily saying that we should all be farmers. So technology has allowed, because of the rise of mega farming and pesticides and just different things related to the food industry, we can just go to the grocery store and get the food that we need, right? And how do we get there? Do we walk there? No, we don't walk there. We drive there, right? So technology relieves us of the burden of walking, right? So we no longer have to walk everywhere or ride a horse and pony, horse and carriage. We can drive our cars. It's relieved us of the burden of driving. Same thing, no longer have to make fires, right? In the hearth. Some of us do, but we have to turn on the air conditioner because it gets too hot, right, to offset it. So that's what we do in our house when we turn on the fire. But we don't need our fire. We don't need to chop wood anymore, right? So we get to let the HVAC system, right, run the coolant in the summer and run the heating in the winter, right? So it's always technology. The pattern of technology is that you don't have to do this very hard thing, this process, anymore. Now you can have this easier version, right? So it always removes this burden on us that's almost always a physical burden, right? And that's not always a bad thing. It's often been a good thing. One thing I forgot to mention, it took 100 years after the automobile was invented, roughly, with some very few exceptions, for people to start going, wait, maybe we shouldn't design our entire city around a car. 100 years. So the point being is that, like, social media just started taking off in the last 10 years, right? ChatGPT, VR, all these things are super recent. So of course we're struggling with categories around this. Of course, like, it's such a new technology. All these are new technologies, so of course it's going to take us time to figure them out, to come up with ethics and methods and research around it. Let's talk about what I call postmodern technologies. I'm kind of misusing the word postmodern, but that's just for lack of better labels. Postmodern technologies are basically anything that was invented after you were born. So anything that was invented after you were born, those are the technologies that we're really grappling with, right? We're not necessarily grappling with how much we drive. Some of us are. But postmodern technologies include examples like the internet, iPhones, Android phones, if you're one of those people that uses that, even though I hate those green bubbles. Social media, virtual reality, like I mentioned, ChatGPT. In these postmodern examples, you have the same exact pattern, but it's a little bit different. And the difference is, it's the same pattern of I'm being robbed of having to go through a very hard process. But I think the difference with these more postmodern electricity-based technologies is that instead of getting a real version of the thing, like right with a fireplace, when you lit a fireplace, you would actually get heat. And when you turn on your heater in your house, you still get heat. They're both heat. They're just coming about in a different way. With these postmodern technologies, you're often getting an illusion of the real thing. And that's a key difference to recognize. You're often getting like a counterfeit or a slight, kind of similar variation of the real thing. And so you're robbed at times of the real thing. So there's many examples. I have a few to give you related to this. The first one is being connected to a local community. Being connected to local community. Robert Putnam wrote a book in 2000, so it's 23 years old, called Bowling Alone. Many of you have probably heard of it. And in the book, he surveyed in detail, with lots of research, Americans' changing behaviors over the last 50, 60, 70 years, showing how we have become increasingly disconnected from family, increasingly disconnected from friends, from neighbors, and from social structures and social institutions, from clubs, right? And it's not just because of technology. There's a lot of other reasons for it. But one of the reasons has to be that you can have all of that on your phone. Like I'm in Facebook groups, and I'm friends with people on Facebook that I've never really met in person. I'm in clubs and different things like that I haven't really been around in person. And also, it's really hard to be connected to a local community, right? Again, technology always robs you of something that's hard. It's hard to, in this economy, right, with housing prices, it's hard to stay in one house for a long period of time and get to know your neighbors. It's hard to, because of the built environment, to talk to your neighbor on the front porch, because those don't really exist anymore. So being connected to a local community takes a lot of time, and it's hard. So it's a lot easier to connect virtually. Let's look at friendship. Friendship is very hard, right? It takes a lot of physical, embodied, right? I'm going to use the word embodied a lot tonight, but embodied essentially means being in your body, being physically present. Having good friends takes a lot of physical space, where you share physical space over coffee, over shared interests, over your golfing together, over knitting together, over playing play dates with your friends, with your kids together. And if you do that over time for 2 years, you actually have friends. But it's very hard. It takes time. Look at this data on friendship. Nearly half of all Americans, 49%, reported having fewer than 3 close friends. This marks a nearly twofold increase from 1990. This is mind-boggling. So 12% of interviewees claim to have 0 friends today, which is 4 times what it was 30 years ago, per the survey. Even though countless studies have shown that having close community, close friends, close connections have proven to make you have more purpose in your life, more meaning in your life, and actually help you to live longer and happier, like you live for an older age. And again, the question is why? And it's not only because of technology. There's other factors at play. But certainly, one of the reasons is because you can have kind of an elusive, kind of fake, partly real, partly fake version of friendship in our pocket, right? We can be connected to everyone all at the same time. And friendship is hard. So technology can rob us of that process of making real friends in physical, embodied ways, and tell us that we actually have close friends and close connections. And it can spread our friendships out everywhere, where all of a sudden, instead of just having 5 to 10 close friends that live in the same city, you can be friends with people all over the world and all over the country, and it's very hard to keep up with that. It takes a lot of time, so it becomes thinner and thinner and shallower. Let's look at conversation. In her book, Alone Together, MIT professor Sherry Turkle wrote this book, and she argues in the book that the research is showing that, Birch and I were actually talking about this earlier, the research is showing that more and more people are losing the ability to have deep, rich conversations, and specifically face-to-face conversations with things like eye contact, things like that, because there's been a lot of people that have been raised texting and direct messaging, right? Because texting and direct messaging, essentially what it does is it protects you and lets you curate. You can't just roll with the punches. Even though, what's interesting about a lot of this research, by the way, is not only can we ground it in like a robust Christian theology, but we can also ground it in evolution, right? So if you believe in evolution and you're not even a Christian, like you can totally agree with like most of the stuff we're talking about tonight. Because if we evolved to sit around campfires and share conversation, and all of a sudden you plop an iPhone in a 12-year-old's lap and let them install whatever apps they want, of course that's going to mess up their brain, right? Of course, because we didn't evolve that way. We evolved by looking into each other in the face and learning the right moment to interrupt, learning what good humor was and timing, learning how to read facial expressions, learning body language, right? And Sherry Turkle argues very well in her book that this is becoming more and more of a problem. She says this: "We are lonely but fearful of intimacy. Digital connections and the sociable robots may offer the illusion of companionship without the demands," there's that difficulty again, without the demands of friendship. Our networked life allows us to hide from each other even as we are tethered to each other. We'd rather text than talk. And again, the reason we do this is because learning how to have a conversation is hard. It takes time. It takes sitting around those campfires, sitting around the dinner table without devices, being interrupted 1,000,000 times by your children. 2 more. Knowledge. This is from The Shallows. So Nicholas Carr wrote The Shallows in 2010, and in it he essentially argues that with the rise of Google, no longer are people required to have deep knowledge of things, even in the folk sense of having deep knowledge of a thing. Now we can outsource that knowledge to YouTube, for example, or to those sorts of or to just Google in general, which again is not always a bad thing. But this is what he says about knowledge in the internet. He says, "What the internet seems to be doing is chipping away my capacity for concentration and contemplation. Whether I'm online or not, my mind now expects to take in information the way the internet distributes it, in a swiftly moving stream of particles. Once I was a scuba diver in the sea of words. Now I zip along the surface like a guy on a jet ski. He also has a lot of good research in that book. Last example of the pattern of technology, writing. ChatGPT was introduced in January to the public of this year. January. That's how new it is, right? Look at this data. 43% of college students have used ChatGPT for their homework, and of those who have used AI tools, 50%, so about a fourth of all college students have used them to help complete writing essays, assignments, and exams. Right? Because writing is hard, and learning to write is hard. I want you to look at, I have a couple other things I want to say before we move on to the next point, but I want you to look at some of this art. This is from, is he Scandinavian? I can't remember. I'll tell you more about the artist if you want to know, because we don't have time. But pay attention to how it affects the body, how the art affects the body, right? He's blinded. He can't see what's in front of him. Think about the isolation, the way that people are far from each other, the way that their bodies are in a posture of complete relaxation. The metaphors he's using of islands, super helpful. That one's funny. I think that one's more of a boomer thing. But it's still funny. Again, pay attention to how it affects the body, how technology works on the body. I think these images are pretty powerful. This is how we all felt during the pandemic, right? Again, so this is one of my favorites. You don't have to go through the process of bearing the Messiah, Mary. Why don't you just experience it like it's real without having to go through the hard part of it, right? I was having a conversation with someone once, and they said, none of this is any different than it was 50 years ago. And I'm like, what do you mean? Well, he's like, well, you had a dad reading the newspaper around the dinner table, and you had a kid reading comic books, and you had the mom reading the Reader's Digest or whatever they read in the 60s or 50s. And then now it's just exactly the same thing. It's just on a screen. And I was like, hold on a second, what? Don't you understand that you finish a newspaper and you put it down and you have to wait the next day for the next newspaper. And you finish the comic book, you have to put it down. You have to wait the next day or the next week or whatever for the next comic book. If you have electricity and power, you never finish the internet. It's literally infinite, right? And so the difference between finitude and infinity is a massive difference, right? Massive. That one's good too. This is some stuff from Neil Postman. He wrote this in 1989? Yeah, 1985, even older. Americans no longer talk to each other, they entertain each other. 1985. They do not exchange ideas, they exchange images. They do not argue with propositions, they argue with good looks, celebrities, and commercials. That's from his book, Amusing Ourselves to Death. Here's another couple quotes. Continuous partial attention is our new default setting. That's from a Microsoft researcher. The tech industry is the largest, most standardized, and most centralized form of attention control in human history. So to summarize the pattern of technology, especially these postmodern technologies, is that you can get the benefit of something like friendship or community or knowledge or even learning how to write without having to go through the difficult process of actually learning those things. And often you're learning those things with your body, right? But here's the thing that I have to say, and this is super important caveat, is that if you are a writer and you've learned how to be a good writer, you can use ChatGPT as a tool to make yourself like a 10% better writer. I know copywriters that are fantastic copywriters, and they use ChatGPT as a tool to make themselves better writers. But that's different than using ChatGPT as a 12-year-old and never actually learning how to write, right? There's a big difference. We can use these tools, Google and ChatGPT and the internet and our connectivity to have true connections to community, right? I have some really meaningful text threads with friends. I am on email chains with my neighbors to always be watchful and talking about what's going on in the neighborhood, right? But that's also because I had already learned how to be a neighbor before that, right? with texting, I've already learned how to talk to people and to be friends and have a friendship, in-person friendship, embodied friendship that only enriches the text conversation. So if these postmodern technologies are used exclusively, they can be detrimental to people's development, especially our kids. So it's a big difference between using these as tools as adults, and all the research that I've seen is suggesting that it can be really harmful for kids, especially under the age of 16, under the age of 16, because of brain development, like I said, because evolutionary biology would back this up. Even if you don't, believe in that, it's fine. We can talk about that later. So that's the pattern of technology. Let's talk about God's purposes for humanity. So in Genesis, God creates us in the image of God. We've talked about this quite a bit at our church, but it's important to kind of go back and refresh ourselves on what it means to be made in the image of God. So for most of church history, being made in the image of God meant that you had reason, you had consciousness, you had intellect, and that's what separated us from the animals. Unfortunately, that was imported from Greek philosophy, and it's actually not biblical. Over the last 50 or so years, there's been a lot of scholarly research around ancient Near Eastern artifacts and archaeological discoveries, and we've discovered statues in like Mesopotamia and places like this that had inscriptions like, this so-and-so ruler in the image of God, or the Son of God, right? Or it had the same language that we see in Genesis. So we've been able to, a lot of scholars over the last 30, 40, 50 years have been able to really drill down on what does it really mean to be made in the image of God. And the best way to think of it is if you were to imagine like ancient Near East, you're in the ancient Near East, 2000 BC, 1000 BC, just super old. There's, dust and desert and gardens, and there's, far away is Pharaoh. And you find yourself going into a temple, and in the temple you see a statue. Well, the statue was the image of that regional god, right? And usually when you entered a town in the ancient Near East and also in the Greco-Roman world, you had to pay homage to the statue. You had to offer sacrifice to it. You had to acknowledge its presence, that it ruled over that land. But not only that, the statue, and therefore the god who the statue represented, the statue also meant that not only was he present over this land, this regional area, but also he was responsible and kind of in charge of the flourishing of that local culture, right? Bringing rain and bringing like a good harvest, right? So when you read the Genesis account of creation, what you have is you have the whole of creation, and right in the middle of the creation, God puts his statues, right? Yahweh, which is the Old Testament word for God, places in the middle of the garden his idols to show his presence over that place and to be represented in his willingness to attend to creation, right? And those idols are human beings. We are the idols of God, the images of God. So the first aspect of being made in the image of God is to have physical presence with him and each other. That God creates us to have physical presence. This is such a huge theme in the Bible. Some people, one of my favorite scholars on this topic, Michael Morales, he argues that the entirety of Scripture, all of the Scripture, is driven by the idea of presence. The whole entire Bible. He says this expulsion from the divine presence is the central tragic event that drives the history of redemption, determining and shaping the ensuing biblical narrative. Indeed, all of the drama of Scripture is found in relation to this singular point of focus, Yahweh's opening up the way for humanity to dwell in his presence once more. So in his work, he actually traces presence all through the Scripture, from Jesus all the way to Revelation, Pentecost. That God is attempting to find this physical presence again. Even if you think about the Old Testament tabernacle cultus, tabernacle system, the temple cultic system, it was all about God coming back and dwelling with his people again, right? And so physical presence, God creates Adam and Eve. He puts them in the garden. They are his statues that reflect and represent and embody that physical presence, that physical relationship with God. But it's not just presence with God, right? That Adam and Eve are called to have. He doesn't say just, I want you to dwell with you. I want you to be in the garden. Adam and Eve are also called to be attentive to the garden. They have a task. If you've been in church, more recently, you might have heard this. It's called, a lot of scholars call it the cultural commission or the cultural mandate. It's this idea that we weren't just put in the garden just to sit there and have quiet times, but we were supposed to be fruitful, multiply, fill the earth, subdue it, right? We were supposed to enact God's rule on creation by being attentive to his creation, but also name the animals, have babies, push the boundaries of the garden further and further outward and onward. Read this amazing quote. I love this from G.K. Bill. He's doing a commentary on this idea in Genesis. The intention seems to be that Adam was to widen the boundaries of the garden in ever-increasing circles by extending the order of the garden sanctuary into the inhospitable outer spaces. The outward expansion would include the goal of spreading the glorious presence of God. This would occur especially by Adam's progeny, born in his image and thus reflecting God's image and the light of his presence, as they continued to obey the mandate given to their parents and went out to subdue the outer country until the Eden sanctuary covered the earth. Right, so this call, the cultural mission, is a call to attend to the garden of our lives, to take chaos and to put order to it, to make culture, to take the good and make it very good. If you followed Andy Crouch at all, he wrote a book in 2008 called Culture Making, where he talks about this idea that the pattern of the cultural commission is a pattern of taking trees and making houses, of taking grapes and making wine, taking wheat and making bread, that we can actually improve on what God has created by reworking with the materials and making it into something even better than it started with, right? So that's the cultural commission. So being made in the image of God is about two things, right? Two things. It's having physical presence with God and other image bearers. Physical presence, embodied presence. But also it's about being attentive to his creation by caring for it, and turning it into a God-honoring culture. So it's about embodied presence and embodied attention. Embodied presence and embodied attention. This is where we get super practical real fast. Okay, so that's all the theology we're going to do around the Imago Dei. So sorry if that was too much or if you've heard all of that before, but we're going to go real practical. So here's how I want to define embodied presence. Embodied presence is close bodily proximity to persons or materials. Presence is how we experience intimacy with God and each other. Here's an example of embodied presence. At 330 to 550 yards away, we can distinguish between humans, animals, and bushes. At 110 yards, we can begin to see movement and body language of another person. At 55 to 75 yards, we can recognize a person's face. At 38 yards, we can conduct one-way communication with a loud voice. And at 24 to 27 yards, we can read facial expressions and dominant emotions. Intimacy and the ability to know people on a deep level is directly tied to physical proximity. What is sex but just density between bodies, right? It's very close. You're very, very close to each other. This is also why, by the way, when you get on the elevator, it's so awkward, because you're densely packed with a bunch of people you don't know, right? They're about to kiss you on the cheek because they're standing right there awkwardly. So this is embodied presence, right? It's embracing this idea that to do something a certain way requires me to physically show up, right? Here's how I define embodied attention. And again, embodied presence and embodied attention are practical reworkings of the two aspects of what it means to be made in the image of God, okay? I had to skip a lot of stuff to get through this tonight, but if we want to talk about it more later, we can. So we did embodied presence, now we're doing embodied attention. A sustained focus of the senses or being attentive to something outside your head. Attention is how we experience bodily habits, rituals, and routines. This is from Matthew Crawford. He's a philosopher at UVA. He wrote this book called The World Beyond Your Head. He says this about attention. Attention is the thing that is one's most own. We choose what to pay attention to, and in a very real sense, this determines what is real for us, what is actually present to our consciousness. But it is also true that our attention is directed to a world that is shared. One's attention is not simply one's own, for the simple reason that its objects are often present to others as well. And indeed, there is a moral imperative to pay attention to the shared world and not get locked up in your head. To attend to anything in a sustained way requires actively excluding all the other things that grab our attention. It requires, if not a ruthlessness towards oneself, a capacity for self-regulation. Without the ability to direct our attention where we will become more receptive to those who will direct our attention where they will. He's talking about the attention economy, which is what a lot of economists talk about when they talk about these evasive postmodern technologies. So again, like I mentioned, none of us have this down, right? Every time I prepare I haven't done a talk quite like this. Most of my stuff has been more theological, but every time I prepare for it and read these quotes and stuff, I just feel terrible because I'm like, man, I'm just really bad at this right now. I'm on my phone too much. I'm distracted too much. So just to restate what I did at the beginning, there's no shame right now. There's no shame in this. It's all grace. We've all been too distracted. We've all been not fully present when we should have been. And these technologies are just constantly coming at us. So participation, we need to do this together. We need to talk about this together openly and transparently, not only in our church, but also in our small groups, in our neighborhoods, and even in our schools. The pattern of technology, right? That's important to remember, that it always robs us of something. And sometimes that's a good thing, right? I didn't necessarily want to walk here tonight, but sometimes it's a bad thing. And to be aware of the work it does on our bodies and what it robs us of. And then God's purposes for humanity, which we talked about, this idea of a reclaiming of the Imago Dei as becoming more attentive and more present. So now let's go to our last point, which is, I forgot to skip to that. There you go. The plan. So our last P word, the plan. Okay, so on your handout that you're going to discuss together, there's a scheme on the back of it that I've spent quite a few years working on. And at their tables, you'll be able to talk about it. But feel free we're going to pull it up on the screens too. This is a scheme that I've developed, like I said, over the last few years, and I found it's a really helpful way to do an analysis of my own habits and rituals and things like that, but also a way to think about technology, especially these postmodern evasive technologies. So, of course, on the top, you have high attention, which is some sort of a sustained focus. Down on the bottom, you have low attention, which you could call distraction. On the left, physical distance, which would be I call low embodied presence. And on the right, high embodied presence. So, to talk about them a little bit, let me see if I can give you some examples. Skip. Okay, so here's a really simple example. On the top right, cooking a meal from scratch. Whenever you're making a meal, you have to physically be close to the materials, right? You can't do it on Zoom very easily. You have to have the tomatoes in your hand. You have to have the onions, and it's hard. My eyes always cry. I have to wear goggles when I cut onions. It's so bad. So you're physically close to the materials, right? And at the same time, it takes a good amount of attention. I can't be distracted with my phone. I can't be distracted with other things to be able to do a good job on it. As you move up to the right, I don't know if I put this on here. I probably didn't. You go more into community. As you move down to the left, you get more into like isolation. Up to the right, it takes a ton of vulnerability, takes a ton of courage. Right? Up to the right, you would have like sports. Sports will never go away in human history because they are up to the right. Live music. Live music is always better than Spotify because it's up to the right. If you think about every beautiful, this is at least true for me, every beautiful, meaningful experience you've had. So for me, it's like going to Rome when I was 17, witnessing the birth of of all my children, getting married, like all these there's a couple meals I've had with my wife and with friends that have been like sacramental moments where God kind of broke in a little bit and I felt glory, right? Like it was like a thin space. All of those moments that I can think of are in the top right, all of them. And you could also put spiritual disciplines, gathering together on Sunday for worship, taking the Eucharist. All of those things would be top right. Top left would be virtual reality, right? It would be these very isolating, it would be social media, it's smartphone addiction, it's these kinds of things. The things on the top right are always hard, I have found. That's why I had like power and low power. So it takes a great deal of wisdom. If you always do the things on the top right, you'll be exhausted all the time, which is not helpful. But if you always do the things on the bottom left, it's not helpful. Most of our work is on the top left. And so most of us spend a great deal of our time in the top left, which is high attention, right? Most white-collar work is in that field. And then we come home and we go into the bottom left, right? And we go to the top left and the bottom left. And the bottom right, by the way, that's where like trauma and addiction triggers live. So hop right is where we want to cultivate habits and rituals, routines with our kids. So, for example, using Sherry Turkle as an example, I think I have this in here. No, I don't. So what she would say is that you should have your kids talk on the phone more than text, because there's something about you're using your body more. If we go back to this, it's more vulnerable. You have to learn how, like, when's it okay to interrupt somebody? Because sometimes it is okay to interrupt, and sometimes it's not okay. You have to learn these very strange verbal cues, and it's more embodied, right? When you're using your voice, often you're using your hands, because everybody uses their hands when they talk. And so it's more physical to use your voice. Texting, usually you're just using your thumbs or fingers if you're typing it. So the general rule is that if you can choose an option that's further up to the right, it's almost always going to be better with wisdom, right? If you're, like I said, and this, I would put sleep up there too, right? Sleep is becoming fully present in yourself, right? We should all have sleep rituals that we go through where we kind of become present. We have to kind of calm our anxieties. Sometimes we do some deep breathing. Everybody has different rituals. We might drink a glass of tea, like my wife. But you can't make yourself go to sleep. You actually have to become attentive to the conditions that create sleep. And so if you create the conditions for sleep and you're attentive to that and you become present in your body, sleep naturally happens. But you can't make yourself sleep, right? So you could put sleep in the top right. I'm trying to think if there's anything else important to cover before we pray and break up. But that's essentially the scheme. I found it's really helpful. Anytime, a couple other examples that I can think of. My wife and I are really lucky to live in a really walkable neighborhood, Jefferson Heights, which is really close by. And when we moved there 10 years ago, we decided every time we go on a date, we're going to walk. Like, unless it's like pouring rain or something like that. We're just going to force ourselves to walk. And one of the things that's amazing about that is there's all this research around walking and brain health, and like actually all the greatest philosophers in history always had their best ideas when they were walking, because it does this left brain, right brain thing, right? And so when Melissa and I do it, we have these amazing conversations because we're kind of in tune with each other as we're walking. Now again, not everybody can do that. We're very, very lucky and blessed to have bought a house in Jefferson Heights before it exploded in popularity. But if you can walk, even if it's a short distance, and have a conversation, it's almost always going to yield better results than not. If you can bike versus drive. And again, this takes a great deal of wisdom. There's people that are physically incapable of doing certain things because of disabilities and things like that. So it takes a great deal of wisdom, but I found it's a helpful scheme to think about evaluating and curating our habits in our lives. That when we can go up to the right, we should, versus going down to the left. So anyway, I'm going to pray for us, and then Courtney's going to come back up and give some summary, and then we're going to break up into our table groups. Jesus, thank you for this group of people, for being willing to come to this group, this parentology tonight. Be with us as we discuss, Holy Spirit being among us. Give us good ideas, good thoughts. Help us to be more present. Help us to be more aware of your presence, just like the song we sing says, but also be more present to each other, to the needs around us, and help us to be more attentive to our habits and our rituals and routines. It's in your name we pray. Amen.
Thank you so much, Joey. Just really, really grateful for even having the opportunity to have this conversation and that all of you are here. Really, when we get to the root of this issue, we find that we're not embedded in community like we once were. Some of Joey's examples admitted that his proximity to his neighbors and where he is in the city gives him a privilege that maybe some of you in this room don't have. And so I want to open that door for conversation of ways that you can embed community in your own life, because we know that isn't quite so easy for everyone. We also know that the ability to be connected through social media and apps really has magnified many of the issues, which I think he got to a little bit of things that predate technology. We have beauty standards, socioeconomic problems, capitalism, patriarchy, that all somehow become magnified by the use of technology. And so technology really has the ability to make depressed children and teens more depressed. the insecure more prone to body image issues, and people who have trouble focusing more prone to addiction. But I believe, and I really, really believe, that the children are going to be all right, and I see this through my own interactions with your kids on a near daily basis. There is so much beauty, though, learning from our own missteps, from learning that the data presented is probably speaking to something within us right now, and also acknowledging that we have to redeem how technology and community can coexist in our lives. And so my hope is that as you encounter these conversations, whether it is a decade from now or it is tomorrow, though I hope you wait and let yourself have some time before having these conversations, that you'll approach them with confidence and grace and not fear, because technology is not the enemy, and I don't want you to think that's the case of this conversation. Lack of communication or lack of connection and community is what is at the root of this. And so may we all be a community of connection around tables and parks much more often than around screens. If you have any takeaways from tonight, I would summarize it into 3. The first is you are not meant to do this alone. Technology in and of itself is not inherently bad. You have to understand and hold your child accountable to school and church policies around technology. You have to talk to your neighbors and your parents' kids who are hosting playdates and sleepovers and set technology boundaries together. And perhaps even create your own written house rules, just like a chore list, though maybe make it sound a little bit better than chores. 2, ask how you are personally demonstrating a healthy relationship with technology, not only with your phone and computer, but take into consideration the whole gamut of tech in your life: video games, television, AI, virtual realities, even Alexa. We've become really dependent on a lot of things that maybe we should take step back into and take responsibility for, because children watch, and then they do, no matter what their age is. And 3, the attachment and relationships happening in your own household are going to dictate your child's relationship to technology. Watching a movie together, playing Mario Kart, these are things where real community happens, and we're aware of that. But that is a much different reality from your child going into their room, locked away on social media by themselves. And our takeaway as a church body and a family ministry is this: we believe that in our kids and youth programs, we can have much more meaningful interaction by talking to one another. And so we don't default to or even depend on technology to be an integral part of our Time and Mission Kids, youth group, or any other sponsored program that we have. And we actually request that all of our students who do have phones, iPads, smartwatches, etc., don't use them at all, and we even have a place for them to physically put them away. We have been known to have the occasional Just Dance party on a Friday night, but that night usually unravels into clusters of friends talking and playing games with one another, and that's what we want to encourage in our space. We believe in leading by example, and believe that we are engaging children in such a way that they do not desire to be on social media or in front of a screen. And so before we head into table groups, I want to point out the resources that are available to you. I know there's kind of a lot of information out there. So 1, out here, there are several books that we recommend. They're related to parenting in a world filled with tech, and they range from parenting teens who already have a smartphone to safeguarding your house entirely if you choose to be tech-free. 2, if you're interested in hearing more research data and tips, I've made a Spotify playlist that is also available through a QR code on the table out there. It has probably 20 hours of podcast ranging from 6 minutes long to an hour long that is full of data, full of information to help you have these conversations. Again, a wide range. The subject line should give you a good idea of what you're getting into. 3, we have the U.S. Surgeon General's Advisory on Social Media and Youth Mental Health. That's on the table right to the left. It is a 25-page packet. Some of you grabbed that on your way in. It is hefty, but it gives a lot of good insight into what data has already been collected and what data we know there is to collect. For many of your children, they're going to be living this reality for 10, 20 years before we get any real data on if social media is detrimental long term. And 4, we have at the table copies of a family media agreement. And so this is a tangible way for you to take something home, probably for children who are a little bit older and can have a conversation with you about this. It's created by Common Sense Media, which is it's a really great nonpartisan resource, and it's for all ages and media types, not just tech. And you'll also have a parentology handout. It has a ton of questions on the front, and then this scheme on the back of it with some additional questions. They're meant for you to have guidance in your conversations tonight, but also guidance with your partner, with anyone else in your family, with the people in your children's lives who are leading. So you're going to want to take that home and continue to use that as a resource. And then lastly, when you're breaking into table groups, you're going to be able to go to a table based on your stage with your child. So we have a table for those who hope to become parents or have new babies, those for parenting toddlers, those for early elementary, those for tweens and teens. And if you have children with a wide range of ages, we just ask you go where you feel most comfortable. If you are a leader or was just someone interested in this conversation who showed up, thank you. I'm so glad that you're here. And we do ask that you stay and join in on the conversation. Join any table that you feel comfortable. We would love to have your insight. And then we'll give you some time warnings throughout the evening. We have childcare available through 8 p.m. Lastly, thank you so much for being here. I cannot express how, I'm so impressed by all of you showing up to our first event and having trust that we were doing something worthwhile, and I hope you feel that way at the end. But again, I would love and welcome any and all feedback. Please find me if you have any thoughts for future topics or things that are important to you that you felt like were missing from tonight's session. So I know Joey prayed for us. I'm going to pray for us, and when I say amen, you're welcome to leave. Father, we thank you because everything is a good gift from you. Everything you made is called good, and so we ask for your guidance. We ask that you steward us in our relationships with one another, with our children's relationships with technology. And may you bless us, and may your presence be always with us. May we walk both humbly and confidently into all that you've called us to. Be with us in our conversations tonight and in all the days and weeks to come. Amen.